Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari are currently focused on addressing several critical issues related to braking performance, working intensively on multiple fronts including the braking system itself, engine management strategies, and overall car setup. Their goal is to restore the confidence and consistency that the Briton requires to perform optimally during the crucial braking zones on Formula One circuits around the world. The first part of the 2025 Formula One season has not unfolded as either Lewis Hamilton or Ferrari had initially expected or hoped for. The seven-time Formula One world champion has struggled to establish the ideal synergy and driving harmony with the Ferrari SF-25 race car. On numerous occasions throughout the season so far, he has found himself trailing behind his Maranello teammate Charles Leclerc, who has consistently demonstrated strong pace and adaptability. The root of these difficulties lies primarily in braking performance. Although braking should theoretically be an area of strength for Lewis Hamilton, given his extensive experience and skill, he has been unable to extract the kind of braking performance from the Ferrari that he previously achieved while driving for Mercedes. This challenge largely stems from significant differences in the design philosophies of Ferrari and Mercedes, particularly with regard to chassis construction, power unit characteristics, and braking system architecture. These factors have combined to create a scenario that Lewis Hamilton and the Ferrari technical team are still actively working to understand and optimize. One of the major topics of discussion ever since Lewis Hamilton made the high-profile move to Ferrari was the comparison between his driving style and that of Charles Leclerc. Many within Ferrari and the Formula One community had hoped that Lewis Hamilton's driving style would closely resemble Charles Leclerc's, which could offer advantages in terms of car development and setup alignment. In contrast, the previous Ferrari driver Carlos Sainz tended to adopt a driving approach that sacrificed some speed at corner entry in order to gain better traction and acceleration on corner exit. Charles Leclerc's style, by comparison, is notably more aggressive on corner entry, carrying significantly higher speed through the initial part of the corner. From this perspective, Lewis Hamilton's driving style is more similar to that of Charles Leclerc, although the two drivers have distinct preferences when it comes to car balance. Charles Leclerc typically prefers a car that exhibits more oversteer characteristics to help induce greater rotation through the corner, which he manages expertly by controlling a relatively light rear end. On the other hand, Lewis Hamilton prefers a more stable rear axle setup that provides greater rear-end stability through corners. This difference in driving and car balance preferences partly explains why, beginning in the 2022 Formula One season, even during Lewis Hamilton's final years at Mercedes, he struggled when compared to his teammates. The underlying cause is closely linked to the new generation of ground-effect Formula One cars, which are inherently challenging to balance. These cars tend to behave differently depending on whether they are negotiating slow-speed or high-speed corners. At low speeds, ground-effect cars often exhibit understeer, which means the front tires lose grip and the car does not turn sufficiently. At high speeds, however, these cars can become unpredictably oversteering, meaning the rear end of the car can become unstable and step out unexpectedly. In this context, a technical directive issued by the FIA at the end of May 2025, which imposed stricter flex tests on front wings to reduce aerodynamic advantage, inadvertently made matters more difficult for Lewis Hamilton. This directive increased the stiffness requirements of the front wings, slightly amplifying the oversteer characteristics in faster corners, making the car harder to control in those situations. Amid this general challenge faced by all teams with ground-effect cars, Lewis Hamilton has also had to come to terms with the unique and specific characteristics of the Ferrari SF-25 chassis. Upon arriving at Ferrari, Lewis Hamilton found himself driving a fundamentally different type of race car than those he had become accustomed to in his previous Formula One campaigns. The Ferrari SF-25 places greater emphasis on front-end grip and is lighter on the rear end, which demands a distinct approach to car setup and driving style. The performance gap between Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc is partly due to the time the Briton has needed to spend experimenting with new setup philosophies in an attempt to bring the SF-25 closer to his personal driving preferences. After several months of extensive testing and trial, Lewis Hamilton came to the conclusion that the setup strategy employed by Charles Leclerc was the only approach that consistently allowed the car to perform at a competitive level. At the British Grand Prix in Silverstone, Lewis Hamilton analyzed the situation by acknowledging that Charles Leclerc has been part of the Ferrari team for many years and has played an integral role in developing the current generation of Ferrari cars. Leclerc was comfortable with the car's behavior, liked how it performed, and had found a method to make the SF-25 work effectively. Lewis Hamilton admitted that he tried alternative setup paths that should theoretically have worked but for some reason did not deliver the expected results. Gradually, Lewis moved closer to adopting the setup approach used by Charles Leclerc. Lewis Hamilton could potentially derive benefits from recent technical updates introduced by Ferrari. Notably, the new rear suspension system has broadened the car's operating window, allowing for greater setup flexibility. This development has made it possible to explore a wider range of setup options without resorting to what Charles Leclerc previously described as extreme setups. Charles Leclerc explained that previously the car was very unpredictable and challenging, especially when trying to extract the last few tenths of a second during qualifying's crucial Q3 phase. Slightly exceeding the limits often came with a heavy penalty in terms of performance loss or car instability. The new suspension has made the car more forgiving. Drivers can push harder against the limits, and even if they exceed them, the loss in performance is less severe. On paper, these modifications should align better with Lewis Hamilton's driving preferences. However, the practical benefits are still only partially visible on track. For example, at the Hungarian Grand Prix, Lewis Hamilton chose to run a rear wing with a higher downforce setting compared to Charles Leclerc. This decision underlines the ongoing difficulties Hamilton faces in managing a rear end that remains too unstable for his liking. Efforts to improve the braking performance and overall car balance extend beyond purely mechanical changes. They also involve the electronic control and software management of the Ferrari power unit. In moving to Ferrari, Lewis Hamilton has had to adapt to a different power unit concept compared to what he was used to at Mercedes. Differences include the way power delivery is managed, the level and nature of vibrations, and the way engine braking is integrated. Lewis Hamilton himself pointed out during an interview with Sky Sport F1 in Bahrain that he was using engine braking in a way that was completely new to him. Engine braking refers to the deceleration force generated by the internal combustion engine's mechanical friction combined with the regenerative braking action of the electric motor component known as the MGUK. These braking effects are coordinated by the power unit's electronic control unit in combination with the hydraulic brake system to slow the car down effectively during deceleration zones. The Ferrari power unit employs significantly more aggressive engine braking settings than the Mercedes power units Lewis Hamilton had been familiar with since his early years at McLaren. This aggressive engine braking further undermines the Briton's confidence when entering corners, as it destabilizes the car's balance. Unlike disc brakes, which apply braking force evenly to all four wheels, engine braking is distributed unevenly between the left and right sides of the car through the differential system. This uneven distribution of braking force induces oversteer, which can help rotate the car more easily into corners, but simultaneously makes the rear end less stable and harder to control. Lewis Hamilton is actively trying to adjust his driving style to better suit the specific characteristics of Ferrari's power unit. At the same time, he is working closely with the Ferrari engineering team to moderate the aggressiveness of the engine braking by making precise adjustments within the engine mapping parameters. Lewis Hamilton also noted another significant difference between Ferrari and Mercedes concerning the braking hardware itself. During the Bahrain Grand Prix, he observed that Ferrari uses Brembo brakes, while Mercedes has relied on carbon industry braking systems for the last 15 years. He did not imply that one supplier was technically superior, but highlighted that the two braking systems have very different characteristics and behaviors. Just as different philosophies exist for car design and engine concepts, the same principle applies to braking systems. One of the key characteristics defining a braking system is the length of the brake pedal travel. That is, how far the pedal moves when the driver depresses it. Pedal travel is influenced by the stiffness and compliance of various components, such as brake discs, brake pads, calipers, and hydraulic lines. A shorter pedal travel allows a driver to reach maximum braking pressure more quickly, which helps to apply braking force faster and more responsively. However, if the pedal travel is excessively short, the driver may find it difficult to modulate the braking effort smoothly, which is why pedal feel and travel must be carefully tailored to the driver's preferences. Another distinctive trait of braking systems lies in the materials used for the brake discs and brake pads. These materials determine the amount of friction generated at different temperatures and pressure levels. The braking response is dynamic and changes during the course of a braking event, which means that different brake materials and suppliers produce different bite characteristics. Bite refers to the moment when the brake system reaches maximum friction at peak pressure. Ferrari and Brembo have worked together to develop brake pads with specific friction characteristics. Starting from the Canadian Grand Prix, Charles Leclerc was given access to a new rear pad compound designed to deliver quicker and more consistent response. Lewis Hamilton adopted the same new brake pads starting from the Belgian Grand Prix. Initially, he was surprised by the difference and locked up his rear wheels at the final chicane during qualifying, but after some adaptation, he provided positive feedback on the improved brake performance. Looking ahead to the 2026 Formula One season, Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari continue their comprehensive efforts to develop the car and driving style towards achieving the perfect braking feel and balance. Ferrari hopes that the 2026 car will represent a significant step forward. It will be the first car designed under the new regulations, not entirely built around Lewis Hamilton's driving style, but it will nevertheless consider his preferences as much as possible within the constraints of the rules and design philosophy. The biggest improvement for Lewis Hamilton, however, may come from the retirement of the current ground effect cars, which have proven to be inherently uncomfortable and challenging for him to master fully.